the judgment music, and the darkness. The chamber of endless voices stood at the heart of the galactic assembly, structure so vast that entire moons could fit within its curved walls. Chamber had been carved from a single crystalline asteroid over 10,000 years ago, and its transparent surfaces reflected the light of 1,000,000 distant stars. Here in this place of ancient power, the fate of civilizations was decided. Today it would decide the fate of humanity. Commander Elena Vasquez stood in the center of the speaking platform, a circular disc of polished metal that hovered 300 meters above the chamber floor. Around her, arranged ascending rings that stretched upward like the petals of some massive flower, sat the representatives of 47 galactic civilizations. Each species had earned its place through millennia of proven stability, careful diplomacy, and adherence to the codes that had maintained galactic peace for longer than human recorded history. Elena was 42 years old, though the stress of the past months had added a decade to her appearance. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, revealing a face marked by sleepless nights and impossible decisions. She wore the formal uniform of the United Human Territories, deep blue with silver accents, though she knew the uniform would mean nothing. After today, the assembly had already made its decision. This hearing was merely a formality, a final performance. Before the sentence was carried out, the eldest speaker rose from the highest tier, his form barely visible in the distance. He was a Kavari, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell that glowed with soft purple light. His species had existed for 3 million years, had seen the birth and death of stars, and had guided the galaxy through countless crises. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the chamber like a song that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. The assembly has reviewed all evidence presented by and against the species known as humanity. The charges are as follows: unauthorized expansion into 17 contested systems, development of weapons technology without proper oversight, genetic modification programs that violate the preservation accords, cultural contamination of 14 primitive species, and most seriously, the demonstration of expansionist philosophy that threatens the stability of galactic civilization. Elena listened without moving, though each word felt like a physical blow. The charges were not false, not exactly. Humanity had expanded rapidly in the 70 years since first contact. Human scientists had pushed the boundaries of what the assembly considered safe research. Human explorers had made contact with species the assembly had designated as protected, but these were not crimes born of malice. They were the natural expressions of a young species eager to explore, to learn, to grow. The problem was that the galaxy did not want humanity to grow. The elder species had achieved a perfect equilibrium over countless ages. Every civilization knew its place, accepted its boundaries, and followed the ancient rules. Then humanity had arrived, bursting with energy and ambition and ideas that challenged 10,000 years of careful order. To the elder species, humanity was not just different, humanity was chaos given form, a threat to everything they had built. The eldest speaker continued, his voice filling the immense space. We have debated this matter for 6 cycles. We have consulted the wisdom of our ancestors and the predictions of our most advanced probability engines. The conclusion is unanimous. Humanity represents an existential threat to galactic stability. Your species grows too quickly, adapts too readily, and refuses to accept the limitations that all civilized peoples must embrace. You are a fire that left unchecked will consume everything it touches. Alina finally spoke, her voice amplified by the platform systems to match the eldest speaker's resonance. We came to you in peace. We shared our discoveries freely. We asked only to be part of this great community of minds. If we have made mistakes, give us the chance to correct them. If we have caused offense, allow us to make amends. Do not condemn an entire species for the growing pains of youth. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then a different voice spoke, this one belonging to a Thoraxian, a reptilian species whose empire stretched across 200 star systems. We gave you chances. We offered guidance. You ignored our warnings and continued your reckless expansion. You treat the galaxy as a playground for your ambitions. You do not understand the delicate balance that keeps our civilization from tearing itself apart. More voices joined in, a chorus of alien perspectives united in their verdict. The Koran spoke of human aggression. The Silvari complained of cultural disruption. The machine intelligence, known as the collective, cited statistical projections showing humanity's expansion curve intersecting with catastrophic conflict within 500 years. Each species had its reasons, its fears, its justifications. Together they formed an unbreakable wall of opposition. The eldest speaker raised one crystalline appendage in silence. Fell once more. The sentence of this assembly is exile. All human presence will be removed from recognized galactic space within 1 solar year. You will be granted safe passage to the region designated as the void reaches beyond the border of explored territory. There you will remain. Any human vessel detected within assembly space after the deadline will be destroyed without warning. This is our final word. The void reaches. Alina felt ice spread through her chest. The void reaches where the galaxy's graveyard, a vast region of space where the laws of physics behaved unpredictably. Rogue black holes drifted through the darkness. Quantum storms appeared without warning, tearing ships apart at the molecular level. Entire star systems winked in and out of existence, trapped in some kind of dimensional flux that no science could explain. No species had ever established permanent settlements there. Most who entered never returned. The assembly was not exiling humanity. They were executing humanity slowly, condemning them to die in the dark. Alina looked up at the thousands of alien faces watching her, at the beings who had decided that her species was too dangerous to exist among them. She thought of Earth, the beautiful blue world where humanity had been born, where her parents and grandparents were buried. She thought of the colonies humanity had built on a dozen worlds, the children growing up under alien skies, the families who had dared to dream of a future among the stars. She thought of the 7 billion humans who would now be forced into exile, driven into the deadliest region of known space, because the galaxy feared what they might become. Part of her wanted to rage, to shout defiance at these ancient beings who had judged her species and found them wanting. Part of her wanted to beg, to promise anything if they would only reconsider. But Alina Vasquez had not become humanity's commander by Giving into emotion, she had learned to control her feelings, to think strategically even in the darkest moments, and in this moment standing alone before the assembled powers of the galaxy, she made a decision that would echo through the centuries to come. You fear what we might become, she said, quietly, but her voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. You look at our passion and see only danger. You look at our potential and see only threat. Very well, we will go into the darkness you have chosen for us. We will face the void reaches that you believe will kill us, and we will survive. She turned slowly, her eyes sweeping across the assembled species. When we return, and we will return, you will see what humanity becomes when it has nothing left to lose. You will learn what we are capable of when we stop asking for your approval and start forging our own path. You have made us your enemy today, not through our choice but through yours. Remember this moment, remember the day you decided that fear mattered more than fellowship. The platform began to descend, carrying Alina back toward the chamber floor. Behind her, the 47 species watched in silence. Some felt satisfaction at removing a threat. Others felt relief that a difficult decision had been made. A very few felt something that might have been regret, but none spoke against the verdict. The judgment had been passed. Within 3 months, the exodus began. 7 billion humans boarded transport ships, evacuation vessels, and converted freighters. They carried what they could: technology, seeds, frozen genetic material, cultural archives. They left behind the homes they had built, the gardens they had planted, the monuments they had raised. The elder species watched with cold efficiency as humanity departed, their fleets escorting the human ships to ensure compliance. At the edge of galactic space, where the last map stars gave way to the unknown, the human fleet paused. Ahead lay the void reaches, a wall of darkness punctuated by strange lights and stranger phenomena. Behind them, the assembled fleets of the galaxy waited to ensure humanity entered and did not return. Alina stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance, looking at the abyss that would be humanity's new home. Around her, officers worked quietly at their stations, their faces showing determination mixed with fear. They all knew the odds. They all understood what they faced, but they were human, and humans had survived worse. They had crawled out of caves when ice covered their world. They had built civilization from nothing. They had reached for the stars when every rational calculation said they should stay home. Now they would enter hell itself, and they would find a way to survive. Give the order, Alina said. All ships proceed into the void reaches. Stay together, watch each other's backs, and remember, we are human. We adapt, we overcome, we endure. The fleet moved forward, thousands of ships carrying billions of souls into the unknown. Behind them, the galaxy breathed a sigh of relief, certain that the human problem had been solved. The void reaches would do what the assembly could not, eliminating this dangerous species without the burden of guilt. They were wrong. The first years in the void reaches were a nightmare beyond imagination. The quantum storms came without warning, tearing through the fleet like invisible claws. Ships vanished into spatial anomalies that opened and closed in seconds. A rogue black hole drifted through the convoy, its gravity well claiming 30 vessels. Before the fleet could scatter, disease spread through populations weakened by stress and radiation exposure. Food. Supplies failed when storage systems broke down in the strange physics of the region. In the first year alone, humanity lost 1 billion people. Entire colony ships disappeared, taking hundreds of thousands with them. Families were separated by catastrophes they could not predict. Children died in their parents' arms. The old and weak succumbed first, but even the young and strong fell to the endless dangers of the void. But humanity did not break. They learned, they adapted, they studied the patterns of the quantum storms and found ways to predict them, not perfectly, but well enough to avoid the worst. They mapped the gravitational anomalies and charted safe routes. Through the chaos, they developed new medicines for the unique radiation types found in the void. They shared resources across the fleet, ensuring that no ship was left to face the darkness alone. And then in the third year of exile, a deep space survey vessel named the Pathfinder discovered something impossible. On a dead world orbiting a dying star, buried beneath 3 km of frozen rock, they found ruins, not human ruins, not ruins from any species in the galactic assembly. These structures were ancient beyond measure, built by a civilization that had existed millions of years before the eldest species had crawled out of their primordial seas. The structures were made of a black material that seemed to absorb all light, creating passages and chambers that looked like holes cut into reality itself. Strange symbols covered every surface, written in a language that no human or alien database could identify. But it was the technology that changed everything. In the central chamber, perfectly preserved despite unimaginable age, they found machines, devices that operated on principles human science barely understood, engines that manipulated space and time, weapons that could unmake matter at the quantum level, power sources that drew energy from dimensions humanity had never even theorized about. The precursors, that was what the researchers called them. The vanished civilization that had built wonders across the galaxy before disappearing without explanation. The Galactic Assembly knew of them, had found fragments of their technology over the millennia, but had always declared precursor ruins off limits. Too dangerous, they said, too unpredictable. The kind of power the precursors had wielded could destroy civilizations that were not ready for it, but humanity had nothing left to lose. They studied the ruins with desperate intensity, teams of scientists working around the clock to decode the alien technology. They made mistakes, early experiments killed dozens when power surges overloaded containment fields. One research station vanished entirely when an engine test created a spatial rift that folded the station out of normal space. But slowly, painfully, they began to understand. The breakthrough came when Dr. James Chin, a quantum physicist who had lost his entire family in the first year of exile, finally cracked the mathematical language the precursors had used. It was not based on numbers as humans understood them, but on probability matrices that described reality as a fluid construct rather than a fixed state. Once they understood the language, the rest followed. Within 5 years of discovering the first ruins, humanity had built their first precursor-based ship, a vessel they named the Phoenix. The Phoenix did not move through space, it chose where to be. It did not fight with conventional weapons. It altered local probability fields to make enemy systems fail. It was powered by something the researchers called a quantum flux core, drawing unlimited energy from the same zero-point field that underlay all of reality. It was a ship that operated on principles the Galactic Assembly would have declared impossible. Built by a species they had condemned to death, Elena Vasquez stood in the launch bay of the Defiance, now orbiting a captured asteroid that served as humanity's largest settlement in the void. She was older now, her hair completely gray, her face lined by years of struggle and loss, but her eyes burned with the same fierce determination that had sustained her through the darkest times. The Phoenix hung in the bay like a dark dream, its hull seeming to shift and flow even when motionless. Around her, the engineers and scientists who had built this impossible ship watched with pride and wonder. They had done something the galaxy believed was beyond them. They had taken technology from a civilization millions of years dead and made it work. They had transformed humanity from victims into something the universe had never seen before. How long until we're ready? Elena asked the lead engineer, a woman named Sarah Akono, who had lost an arm to a radiation accident but refused to stop working. Sarah smiled, a expression of grim satisfaction. 50 ships within 5 years, 100 within 10. The precursor technology is complex, but we understand it now. We can mass produce it. In 20 years we will have a fleet that no power in the galaxy can match. Elena nodded slowly. Then we will have our answer. The galaxy cast us out because they feared our potential. They tried to kill us with exile. Instead, they gave us the freedom to become something greater than they ever imagined. When we return, they will see what humanity truly is. She looked out at the darkness of the void reaches, at the strange lights and impossible geometries that had claimed so many of her people. This place had tried to break them. It had tested them in ways no species should have to endure, but humanity had survived, and in surviving, they had found something the elder races had lost long ago. They had found purpose. They had found strength. They had found the will to rise from ashes and claim their place among the stars. The Phoenix launched on its maiden voyage 3 days later, vanishing into the void to begin its trials, and in the settlement scattered across 100 dead worlds, humanity looked toward the future with eyes that had seen the worst the universe could offer and had refused to look away. They had been judged and found wanting by a galaxy that feared change. Now they would show that galaxy what change truly meant. The exiles would return not as supplicants begging for acceptance, but as masters of power the ancient species had never dared to touch. The darkness had been their forge, the void reaches had been their crucible, and what emerged from that crucible would reshape the galaxy forever. The return and the reckoning. 150 years had passed since humanity vanished into the void reaches. In the comfortable heart of galactic civilization, the elder species had long since forgotten about the young race. They had exiled. Occasionally, historians would reference humanity as a cautionary tale, an example of what happened when a species expanded too quickly without proper wisdom. Consensus among scholars was that humanity had perished within the first decade of exile, their remnants scattered across the deadly expanse of the void. No one survived the void reaches. It was a fundamental truth as certain as gravity or entropy. The Kavari maintained listening posts along the border between known space and the void, automated stations that monitored for any unusual activity. For a century and a half, these stations had detected nothing but the expected chaos of quantum storms and spatial anomalies. Then, on a day that would later be marked as the beginning of a new galactic era, every listening post along a 300 light-year section of the border detected the same impossible signal. Ships were emerging from the void, hundreds of them, thousands of them, and they were broadcasting on frequencies that identified them as human. Admiral Cathros of the Thoraxian Defense Fleet received the alert in his command chamber aboard the dreadnought Eternal Vigilance. He was an old warrior. His scales faded to pale gray after 6 centuries of service. He had fought in the Corinth border wars, had commanded fleets against pirate armadas, and had seen things that would have broken lesser minds. But when he looked at the sensor data streaming across his screens, he felt something he had not experienced in 300 years. He felt fear. The human ships were like nothing in any database. They moved in formations that seemed to flicker in and out of existence, appearing in one location and instantly transitioning to another without crossing the space between. Their holes were constructed from materials that absorbed sensor scans, making it impossible to get accurate readings on their capabilities. Energy signatures fluctuated in patterns that suggested power sources operating on principles the Thoraxians did not understand. These were not the desperate refugee vessels that had limped into the void a century and a half ago. These were warships, and they radiated quiet menace like heat from a star. Cathros sent an emergency transmission to the Galactic Assembly, his voice tight with controlled alarm. This is Admiral Cathros of the 3rd Border Fleet. We have a situation at the void reaches boundary. The humans have returned. I repeat, the humans have returned, and they are not what they were. The message took 3 hours to reach the chamber of endless voices, where it interrupted a routine session on trade regulations. The eldest speaker still the same Kavari, who had passed judgment on humanity generations ago, listened to the report with growing disbelief. Humans could not have survived the void. It was impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. Somehow, against all probability and logic, humanity had endured. The assembly convened an emergency session within hours. Representatives from all 47 species gathered to view the recordings transmitted from the border posts. They watched in silence as the human fleet materialized from the darkness, ship after ship appearing in perfect formation. They studied the analysis reports that showed technology far in advance of anything the assembly possessed. They read the message that the human fleet had broadcast on all frequencies, a message that was now spreading across every communication network in known space. The message was simple and direct to the species of the Galactic Assembly. We are the descendants of those you exiled. We are the children of the void reaches. We have survived what you believed would kill us. We have thrived in the darkness you chose as our grave. We return not as the desperate refugees you cast out, but as equals who have earned our place through trial and transformation. We seek neither revenge nor subjugation. We seek only what was denied to us: recognition and respect. We request a formal audience before the assembly. We trust you will grant us this courtesy. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species argued for immediate military response, for assembling the full might of galactic civilization and driving the humans back into the void before they could threaten stability. Others counseled caution, pointing out that humanity now possessed unknown capabilities that might make conventional warfare catastrophic. A few voices suggested that perhaps humanity deserved to be heard, that a species which had survived the unsurvivable might have wisdom to share. The eldest speaker listened to all perspectives before making his decision. We will grant them audience. We will hear what they have to say, but we will do so from a position of strength. Assemble the primary defense fleet. Position them at strategic points throughout the core systems. If humanity proves to be a threat, we will respond with overwhelming force. The message was sent to the human fleet, granting them permission to send representatives to the Chamber of Endless Voices. The response came within minutes, and it carried a tone that made many of the elder species uncomfortable. It was not grateful or deferential. It was simply accepting, as if humanity had expected nothing less than compliance with their request. 3 days later, a single human ship entered the heart of galactic civilization. It was smaller than the warships that waited at the border, but it moved with the same impossible grace, transitioning through space in ways that made tracking it nearly impossible. It docked at the assembly station without incident, and from it emerged a delegation of 5 humans led by a woman who identified herself as High Chancellor Reeves. Chancellor Maya Reeves was tall and lean, her skin deep brown that seemed to absorb light, her eyes a startling amber that many species found unsettling. She wore a uniform of midnight blue with silver accents that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. She moved with absolute confidence, flanked by 4 others who carried themselves with the same quiet authority. These were not the desperate refugees of a century and a half ago. These were people who had faced the worst the universe could offer and had emerged stronger for it. The assembly chamber had been reconfigured for maximum security. Force fields separated the speaking platform from the surrounding tiers, and concealed weapon systems tracked every movement of the human delegation. Admiral Cathos commanded a battle group positioned just beyond the station, ready to respond if the humans attempted any hostile action. Every precaution that galactic civilization could devise had been implemented, yet somehow none of it seemed adequate. The humans radiated a presence that made the ancient chamber feel smaller, as if they brought with them the weight of the void itself. Maya Reeves stood in the center of the speaking platform and looked up at the assembled species with an expression that was neither hostile nor friendly. Simply measuring, she let the silence stretch for a long moment, letting every being in that vast chamber feel the weight of this moment. Then she spoke, her voice clear and strong, carrying none of the desperation or pleading that had marked Elena Vasquez's final words. In this place so long ago, 150 years ago, you passed judgment on my ancestors. You declared them too dangerous to exist among you. You exiled them to the void reaches, believing that the darkness would do what you lacked the courage to do directly. You tried to kill an entire species through the cold mathematics of impossible survival. You failed. The words fell into the chamber, like stones into still water, creating ripples of unease that spread through every tear. Maya continued, her tone never rising, but carrying an intensity that demanded attention. We did not merely survive, we discovered something in the void that you, in all your ancient wisdom, never found. We discovered the ruins of the precursors, the civilization that existed before your eldest ancestors crawled from their oceans. We learned their language, we mastered their technology, we built a new civilization on foundations that predate your entire recorded history. The void reaches that you feared became our laboratory, our university, our forge. We emerged from that crucible, transformed into something you never imagined we could become. A Koran representative stood, his crystalline form glowing with agitation. You speak of precursor technology as if it is an achievement. The precursors are forbidden, their knowledge is too dangerous for any species to wield. You have violated the most sacred prohibitions of galactic law. Maya turned to face the court indirectly, and her smile was sharp as a blade. We were exiled from your laws when you cast us out. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot banish us from civilization and then claim we must follow civilization's rules. We owe you nothing, not obedience, not compliance, not respect. Everything we have, everything we are, we built in spite of you, not because of you. The chamber erupted in voices, alien languages overlapping in a cacophony of fear and anger. The eldest speaker raised his crystalline appendages, calling for order, but it took several minutes for calm to be restored. When silence finally returned, his voice carried an edge that had not been present in millennia. Why have you returned? If you bear such resentment, why not remain in the void and build your civilization apart from ours? Why risk confrontation by coming back to the space that rejected you? Mia's expression softened slightly, and for the first time something other than cold determination showed in her amber eyes. Because isolation is not advancement. Because we are stronger together than apart. Because despite everything that was done to us, we still believe that different species can coexist, can learn from each other, can build something greater than any could achieve alone. We return because we choose to, not because we need to. We offer partnership not as supplicants but as equals. The question is whether you have the wisdom to accept it. A Silvari diplomat, her gossamer wings shimmering with bioluminescence, spoke carefully. What guarantee do we have that humanity will not seek revenge for the exile, that you will not use your newfound power to dominate or destroy those who wronged you? Maya looked at the Silvari for a long moment. Before responding, we could have announced our return with weapons instead of words. We could have struck at your core worlds before you even knew we had survived. We have the capability. The technology we command could reduce your greatest strongholds to quantum foam, but we chose dialogue. We chose to give you the same chance at understanding that you denied us. That is your guarantee, not promises or treaties, but the simple fact that we are here talking instead of acting. The truth of her words hung in the chamber like a weight. Every species present understood the implication. Humanity held power they could not match, technology they could not counter, and yet had chosen peaceful contact. The question was whether that choice would remain if they were rejected again Admiral Cathros, watching from his command ship, felt his tactical instinct screaming warnings. The humans had positioned themselves perfectly. They had demonstrated capability without overt threat. They had framed the encounter in terms that made any aggressive response from the assembly look like the action of fearful tyrants. If the elder species attacked now, they would be the aggressors, not the defenders. It was masterful strategy, the kind of political and military maneuvering that should have taken millennia to develop. Humanity had learned more in a century and a half of exile than many species learned in a million years of comfortable existence. The debate in the chamber continued for hours. Some species argued for acceptance, recognizing that humanity now possessed the strength to enforce their own legitimacy, whether the assembly agreed or not. Others demanded restrictions, treaties that would limit human expansion and research. A few still clung to the fantasy that humanity could be forced back into the void, though even they could hear the hollowness in their own arguments. Finally, as the chamber's artificial sun began its program sunset, the eldest speaker called for a vote. The question was simple: would the Galactic Assembly recognize humanity as a sovereign civilization with full rights and privileges, or would they maintain the exile and risk the consequences? The vote took 3 hours to complete, each species consulting internally before casting their decision. When the results were displayed across the chamber's crystalline walls, they showed a narrow but decisive majority. 30 species voted for recognition, 17 voted against. Humanity was granted full status within galactic civilization, not out of forgiveness or compassion, but out of recognition of reality. The exile had failed, the humans had returned, and nothing would ever be the same. Maya Reeves received the verdict with a simple nod, as if she had never doubted the outcome. Before I depart, she said, I want to share something with this assembly, a perspective that perhaps only those who have faced extinction can truly appreciate. She gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the speaking platform. It showed images from the early years of exile, the ships breaking apart in quantum storms, the settlements struggling to survive on dead worlds, the monuments to the billions who had died. Then the images shifted, showing the discovery of the precursor ruins, the desperate research, the dangerous experiments. Finally, the display showed humanity's new civilization, vast stations orbiting captured asteroids, cities built inside hollow moons, fleets of ships that moved like thoughts through the darkness. You meant to kill us, Maya said quietly. You wrapped it in polite language about exile and separation, but the intent was clear. You wanted us gone. What you did not understand is that you cannot kill an idea, you cannot destroy a dream. Humanity is not defined by the systems we occupy or the technology we possess. We are defined by our refusal to accept extinction, by our insistence that we have a right to exist, to grow, to reach for something better. You tried to take that from us. You failed, and in failing, you gave us something more valuable than any paradise you could have offered. You gave us purpose. She turned slowly, her gaze sweeping across every tier of the great chamber. We will build our civilization on the border between your space and the void. We will share what we have learned with those who wish to learn. We will trade with those who wish to trade, and we will defend ourselves with all the power we command if anyone tries to exile us. Again, this is not a threat, this is a statement of fact. Humanity has claimed its place among the stars. We earned that place in blood and fire and endless darkness. No one will take it from us. Again, the human delegation departed the chamber in silence, leaving behind a galaxy that would spend decades trying to comprehend what had just occurred. The comfortable certainties of a 100,000 years had been shattered by the return of a species that should have died. Elder races would have to adapt to accept that their monopoly on power and wisdom had ended. Some would welcome this change, others would resist it, but all would remember this day as the moment when humanity stopped asking for permission and started claiming what was theirs by right. Admiral Cathros watched the human ship depart its form, flickering between dimensions as it transitioned back toward the border. He had lived for 6 centuries and had thought he understood the fundamental nature of the universe. Now he realized how little he truly knew. Humanity had done the impossible not once but repeatedly. They had survived the unsurvivable. They had mastered technology that predated known civilization. They had returned from exile stronger than those who had exiled them. He sent a message to his fleet, ordering them to stand down but remain alert. Then he composed a personal message to the Galactic Assembly, one that would be discussed in quiet chambers for years to come. We made an enemy when we could have made an ally. We tried to eliminate a problem through exile when we should have addressed it through integration. We have been given a second chance, but we should not mistake this for weakness. The humans have shown restraint today, but I have seen their ships and studied their movements. If we force them to demonstrate their full capabilities, I do not believe we will survive the lesson. We must learn to coexist with humanity, not because it is noble, but because it is necessary. On the border of the void reaches, the human fleet waited in perfect formation. Maya Reeves stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, looking at the space that separated exile from civilization. Behind her, the void stretched endlessly, filled with the settlements and stations that humanity had built from nothing. Before her, the galaxy sprawled in all its ancient glory, no longer forbidden, but open to a species that had earned the right to explore it. Her second in command, Commander Jackson Torres, approached and stood beside her. "What do you think will happen now?" he asked. "Will they accept us? Will they try to contain us? Will there be war?" Maya considered the question carefully before responding. "All of those things. Eventually, some will see us as partners. Others will see us as threats. There will be conflicts, misunderstandings, perhaps even battles, but we are here to stay. We survive the void. We can survive anything the galaxy throws at us. The real question is whether they understand that yet." She turned to face her crew, men and women who had been born in the darkness, who knew nothing of Earth except through stories, who had built their entire civilization in the most hostile region of known space. They were hard and capable and utterly confident in ways that the comfortable species of the core worlds could never match. They were the children of exile, forged in fire and tempered by impossible odds. "Send a message to all human settlements," Maya ordered. "The exile is over. We have reclaimed our place among the stars. Spread the word across every colony, every station, every ship. humanity has returned, and we return as masters of our own destiny. No longer will we beg for acceptance. No longer will we ask permission to exist. We are here, we are strong, and we will never be cast out again. The message spread through the human territories like wildfire carried by communication networks that operated on precursor technology the elder races could not intercept or jam. Across 100 dead worlds and 1,000 orbital stations, humans celebrated the victory that their ancestors had promised. They had survived, they had thrived, they had returned. The galaxy had tried to kill them and had created something far more dangerous in the attempt. They had created a humanity that knew its own strength, that had nothing left to fear, that had learned to thrive in conditions that would destroy any other species. In the chamber of endless voices, the elder species began the long process of adapting to a new reality. Treaties would need to be negotiated, boundaries would need to be established, new protocols would need to be developed for dealing with a civilization that operated on principles they did not fully understand. Some species approached this challenge with curiosity and hope, others approached it with fear and resentment, but all understood that the galaxy had changed forever. The eldest speaker remained in the empty chamber long after the other representatives had departed, his crystalline form glowing softly in the artificial starlight. He thought of Elena Vasquez, the human commander who had stood in this very spot a century and a half ago and promised that humanity would return. She had been right. Her species had survived, had transformed, had claimed their place among the stars through sheer stubborn determination. He wondered if she had lived to see this day, to know that her final words in this chamber had proven prophetic. He would never know that Elena Vasquez had died 20 years into the exile, killed when a quantum storm tore through the research station where she had been working on precursor technology. But her legacy lived on in every human who refused to accept defeat, in every ship that bore the name of those who had died, in every settlement that grew where nothing should have survived. She had promised the galaxy a reckoning, and today that reckoning had come. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance, uncaring of the drama that played out beneath them. But among those stars, in the spaces between light and darkness, humanity had carved out a domain that would stand for millennia to come. They had been banished to prove they were unworthy. Instead, they had proven that worthiness was not granted by others, but claimed through struggle and determination. They had been cast into the void to die. Instead, they had been reborn, transformed from desperate refugees into masters of technologies that predated galactic civilization itself. The exile was over. The darkness had released its hold, and humanity, bloody but unbowed, had claimed its throne among the stars, not through conquest or domination, but through the simple, undeniable fact of survival. They had faced the worst the universe could offer and had emerged, not broken, but stronger. The galaxy had learned lesson that would echo through the ages. You could exile humanity, but you could never break the human spirit. You could cast them into darkness, but they would forge that darkness into a weapon and return bearing fire. The banished had become the victors, the exiles had become the masters, and the stars themselves would remember the day when humanity proved that they belonged among them not by permission but by right, earned in blood and darkness and unbreakable.